Hello, this is David again, Fairly Secret Music, and today is the what is my favorite band response. I'm not sure who started this, what your favorite band thing was, but I've seen a bunch of people do it, so I decided I'm going to do it. So I have to talk really fast because I have a lot of stuff to get through because I've had a lot of favorite bands. I don't have one favorite band. I just go all over the place, as you will see in this video. So, at first, my favorite band was Kiss. They have been on and off throughout the years. Kiss Dynasty was my very first record ever, bought for me by my brother. Then Queen the Game is my second album I ever got. And although Queen have always been in my top 10, not always my favorite thing to listen to at the time, because as you'll see, my tastes change from all over the place. Second album I ever got. When I started buying my own music, Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love, To Hell with the Devil. These were amazing albums, still are. I was a huge fan of both of these albums. I got this one first, and then we got this because we didn't know about this one until To Hell with the Devil came out. I also was a huge Rat fan also. Theater of Pain is kind of where I jumped off. About a year ago, I got a bunch of hair metal, and I got everything by Motley Crue, and there was a lot of hair metal that I didn't ever give a chance to, and this one, I like most of it. There are a few things where I think they kind of went weird. I don't like Smoking in the Boys' Room. I don't like covers. Around the same time, I also was a huge Night Ranger fan. Of course, I had heard Don't Tell Me You Love Me and Sing Me Away, but it wasn't until Night Ranger's Midnight Madness that I really became a huge fan. Night Ranger 7 Wishes, I remember realizing I had one purchase, and it was either a Dark Side DC Superpowers action figure or Night Ranger 7 Wishes, and I bought it on vinyl and never regret my purchase. I don't think I bought many toys, action figures after that, and I have a lot of friends who are big into action figures, and I love telling them how that was the day I decided not to be a toy guy and to be just a music guy. This is the album that they kind of lost me on, Big Life. I never had this. I thought Secret of My Success was a pretty good song, but from what I had heard, I really didn't like the rest of it at the time. I did get Man in Motion, and I saw them on this tour. I guess they are coming to Minnesota soon. I think I might need to see that. I thought this was a good album, but I just kind of lost interest in them after this one because I discovered Stryper. Stryper were the very first band I ever saw live. I saw them on the Soldiers Under Command tour. My nose is itching. I saw them at the Jesus People Church in Minneapolis, which is now the State Theater. And that was a great show. I had third row seats, and my friend Sam and I went up to the first row and stood on the first row seats for the duration of the show. I also saw them on the To Hell with the Devil tour. I saw them again for a third time on the 30th anniversary of the To Hell with the Devil tour a few years ago. Around 8th or 9th grade, I can't remember what year that was, Racer X became my favorite band. They were just, I could not do without this album, and I accidentally spilt pop all over it. Also, at the same time, my favorite band was Lizzie Borden. This is my favorite album. I totally forgot about them. I was going to grab them. And then I discovered Queensryche, Rage for Order. I think this is the best thing they ever did. A lot of people say Operation Mindcrime. I think this beats it out. I listened to them through Empire, and they were one of my favorite bands through Empire, but they kind of lost me after that. Fate's Warning. I was going to get either Seventh Son of a Seventh Son or Somewhere in Time. I think it was Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And at the last second, I decided to get this, and I do not regret that decision whatsoever. I do have Seventh Son of a Seventh Son now, but I have hardly listened to that album at all. They also did Perfect Symmetry. I saw them with Sanctuary on this tour. I loved Sanctuary, but Fate's Warning were still my favorite band, and they held that spot from '89 on and off with other bands until 2000, where Disconnected came out, and they just really lost me on this album. I have since bought everything, and then they redeemed themselves with Pleasant Shade of Grey, but by that time, you know, but they were for a long time my favorite band, along with King Diamond's Abigail. This is one of my favorite albums. I don't know if he's ever been my favorite band, but this is one of the most listened to albums in my collection. I just listened to it recently with my wife, telling her what was going on in the story, and my wife does not get into metal at all, but we got to the song Abigail, and I said to her, hey, we can, you know, turn this off if you want. And she said, well, why bother now? I need to know how this story ends. So she's a trooper. In 10th grade, I worked with a guy named Steve Peterson who gave me a cassette copy of this and said I should listen to it, and I was hooked. This, Clutching at Straws, Fugazi, Misplaced Childhood, they were up there in my favorite bands. Even when they switched singers, I still loved them. Steve Hogarth's voice these days kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. He is very nasally. I mean, he's a great singer, but I just like Fish better. For some reason, he had that Peter Gabriel feel, and at that point, I already knew about Genesis with Peter Gabriel. So that brings us up to about 9th or 10th grade or something like that, 11th grade. I went to see Billy Squier with Blue Murder opening, and this silly band called King's X that me and my friend Rob knew nothing about. I went to see Blue Murder. He went to see Billy Squier. It was perfect. And King's X come on and blew me away. They were just amazing, and they became my favorite band for quite a long time. Faith, Hope, and Love is one of the few albums I remember basically counting down the days till it came out. I was a fan of Faith No More, but Mr. Bungle came out. This album I hated at first. I hated it so much. I got it on cassette, and I liked the first song, none of the rest of it. Ended up listening to the next song, liked second song, none of the rest of it. Every time I listened to it, I liked the next song, and it took me about 10 listens to really get into this, and I saw them in all 3 tours at First Avenue in Minneapolis, and this was probably one of the most disturbing shows I've ever been to. Mike Patton had blinders, horse blinders, and that gimp mask and a straight jacket on, and man, that was awesome. That was around the same time a friend of mine at school introduced me to Death. So he introduced me to 3 albums. The name of Jay Sullivan. Jay Sullivan, I give you all the credit in the world for these. So he introduced me to Death Human, Last Cracks, Burning Time, and Voivod, Angel Rat. And I became huge fans of all 3 bands. Which way does this go? There we go. This is 1991. All 3 bands, just amazing. I dove headfirst into all their discographies. Around 1993, I was reading a Guitar Player magazine, and they talked about this band called Thought Industry. I ordered it, not knowing what to think, and was absolutely in love. Their drummer, Dustin Donaldson, was one of my favorite drummers of all time. And then they followed it up with this. This was an album that I had to wait for 12 hours to get because I came home. I got a call that the record store had ordered it and it came in, and I had to wait 12 hours to get it. And it was a very interesting 12 hours because I was hanging out with somebody. Anyway, there was a lot of making out, and the next day I got to listen to this for the first time. This is a challenge to listen to. It is fantastic if you want something really different. Marillion came back with this album and became my favorite band again for a while too. This is Holidays in Eden. Totally different than anything they really had done before. A lot of people said they sold out at this point. I thought they just became better songwriters. That was around the same time I became a King Crimson fan. I worked with a guy named Dave Martin at a place called Cheapo, and he and my friend Brandon both were trying to get me into King Crimson, and this album was huge on my playlist. This is the album that came out in 1995. Then I got into Discipline, and later on in like 98 I got into the Lark's Tongue era. If you haven't noticed before, I have a Discipline tattoo and a Lark's Tongue tattoo on my neck. At the same time that was happening, Sylvian Fripp also did just a little bit before that, but I didn't discover them until King Crimson Thrack. Oh, this is actually Ba-Boom, but you get the idea. Sorry, I thought that was Thrack when I grabbed it. Sylvian Fripp, Damage was huge on my playlist in 95. If you could wear out a CD, I should have worn this one out. And around the same time, I found another Guitar Player review for Idiot Flesh, and it referred to them as kind of like a different version of Mr. Bungle. And these guys went on to become half of Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, which I was a huge fan of also. This is their second album called Fancy, where this kind of sounds more in the rock in opposition kind of stuff. And I've just lost everybody by saying rock in opposition because nobody knows what the hell that means. Well, Universe Zero are a Belgian band. I lived and breathed Universe Zero in 1998 through the 2000s. Their drummer is amazing, and this is one of the scariest albums you will listen to. I actually should have had these after, because this is more 98. I screwed that up, because in 95, my nephew turned me on to My Dying Bride, Angel in the Dark River. This just was amazing. The reason they had a violin player, and the reason I play cello is because we wanted to do a project in the same style as My Dying Bride. I got this one. I I actually won this one from my friend Corey because we were arguing about who was in Masters of the Universe. I said it was Courtney Cox. He said it was somebody else. And we made a handshake bet. The loser had to buy the other one a CD, and this was Turn Loose the Swans. This was the album that I decided to go with. My Dying Bride continued their rise to greatness in '96 with this album, and I was so in love with My Dying Bride. I knew an ex-girlfriend was coming over, and I had a friend who really wanted this album, and I kind of stood her up so I could go buy his copy of this because I really wanted him to get into My Dying Bride. What a dork. But they were so good. They kind of lost it with a few albums. I lost interest until 2007. What year did this come out? 2006, when Line of Deathless Kings came out, and I listened to this so much that year. It was perfect for the shit I was going through, and just awesome. Because of my love with My Dying Bride, I sought out this band, Sira, and they had a viola player and a keyboardist, 2 guitarists, drums, and vocalist, and they did these 2 albums, which came out in like '96, and this was in '98, I think. And these guys were one of my favorite bands. Very interesting dynamic of, they have a death metal singer who is the guitar player, and they have a singer who has a super low voice, like Peter Murphy low, Peter Steele low, David Sylvian low, but he has power behind it, and it's just amazing. I think my voice is going out because this is the second video I've done tonight. So that brings us up to the 2000s. There was points where I was a huge, that I totally forgot. I was a huge Enslaved fan, but around 2012, I decided I didn't like metal anymore. I decided I wasn't going to listen to metal. For 3 years, I listened to absolutely no metal. I went headfirst into Beatles. I got all the Beatles albums again. No, I already had them. I rebought all the Beatles albums again in these 2009 digipacks, and then switched the booklet and the CD. So I have the jewel case that I carry around, but the book and the CD are from these digipacks, the remasters. I'm never going to sell any of them, so it doesn't really matter. I bought all the Beatles stuff again. I bought everything McCartney, and I've been buying all of these kind of reissues that come with a second disc. I'm excited because there's a new one coming out soon. The two Wings albums that they have put off doing. I think there's 4 that they need to do, but 2 is good enough for me right now, and they're supposed to come out like simultaneously. So I listened to the Beatles, all the McCartney stuff, and all the Lennon stuff, and then All Things Must Pass and the self-titled Ringo album. I was listening to that probably 3 months straight. That's all I listened to. And my coworkers got so annoyed with listening to Beatles and McCartney and Lennon that they almost had to do an intervention. But luckily, after 3 months, I stopped, and, whatever. So they were super high on my favorite band list. Also, I read the book, the complete Abbey Road recordings, and that really gets you in tune with what was going on when they were recording and all that stuff. After them, because at the request of my coworkers, Bruce Springsteen, I listened to nothing but Bruce for a while there too, but I broke it up a little bit with things at work so as to not bug the shit out of my coworkers. Greetings from Asbury Park. What an amazing album. This is all the remastered stuff. Had I known they were going to remaster each individual album, I wouldn't have gotten this box set, even though it has a sweet, ginormous booklet. But Springsteen, for a long time, was huge. I owned his whole discography on vinyl because I got them for a penny a piece at the record store that I was leaving. And then I only had Greetings from Asbury Park for the longest time. And then when I became obsessed with Bruce about 2 years ago, I picked up everything. And the album Magic is nothing but magic. It's so great. And then the last band that I think was my favorite, I should have called this my favorite band, my favorite obsession, Sly and the Family Stone. They totally opened my eyes to all the R&B that I was missing over the years. And, and this is probably my favorite album that they did. It's their first album. The album that comes in close second is Life. Just amazing, and yeah, just a door opener to so many albums that I never would have gotten into. So those are all my favorite bands through the history of my life, and I hope it wasn't too long.